Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Kazi Muhire. I am the Vice President of Business Affairs for All In-House Entertainment. This is the first episode of Music Wall Street. Thanks for tuning in, guys. As I've been building the label alongside my homies, my business partners, Trey and Matt, we noticed that there's a lot of money being left on the table, especially when it relates to beat makers. I wanted to have this conversation with Beatmakers because you all are the ones who give the artists the final push of inspiration and literally bring their music to life as they try to launch their careers. So when we talk about money being left on the table, guys, let's talk about how we can pick it back up, right? Look, you all have been given such amazing tools in this 2020 era of being beat makers. We know that, platforms have popped up to help support you guys, not only host your music in the marketplace, but also to protect your music, right? So you have platforms like SoundClick, DaVinci Beats, BeatStars.com that help you guys out by getting the artist to essentially sign a lease agreement with you before they just start downloading and using your beat for their own financial gain on Spotify, Apple, and Tidal. But how do you make sure that the artist stays in compliance with that lease agreement? What is a lease agreement? What are copyrights? And more importantly, who's in charge of enforcing the terms of the lease agreements once you and the artist sign that agreement? Now, the short answer is you, my friend. But first, let's talk copyrights. What is a copyright? I think a lot of beat makers are essentially aware that, anytime you guys put together an original beat, meaning you all come up with the snares and kicks and melodies and drums and whatever makes that beat come to life without implementing directly from, other artwork. So like you guys know that if you include movie scenes or other music melodies directly into your beat, it's no longer original. It's only original. It's only an original work if you guys are the ones who put each element of that beat coming together essentially. So now that we have an original work, that becomes 100% owned by you, right? Before anybody goes out and downloads it, that is your beat. And when you have 100% of the copyrights, that means as soon as someone goes out and downloads it, they either A, should be compensating you for your work so that they can license and lease and use the beat, or they should at least be giving you some sort of credit so everybody knows that it's your beat, it's your work, right? But artists are very interesting when they go in and they just start downloading beats really quickly. But when we get them into platforms like SoundClick and they have to sign a lease agreement, what does that mean, right? So we talked about copyrights. Let's talk about lease agreements. So the lease agreement, it functions pretty similarly to anyone's experience of, going in and renting a house. So let's say you own the house. When you have someone sign a lease agreement, it's essentially like you renting your house out to a tenant. The tenant gets to enjoy the house for a limited amount of time, and in that amount of time, they're also paying rent. And very similarly, the artist gets to enjoy your beat once they sign the lease agreement for a limited amount of time in exchange for a fee of, let's say, $150, right? So that's the lease agreement. They click sign, they send you the fee that you're charging for them to use the beat, and for, let's say, 12 months, they're able to use that beat for their song. And y'all are in good places because you've been compensated and they have the right to use the beat. Cool. All right. So the terms of the lease agreement. Why are the terms important? Well, the terms are important because they're essentially the rules of the agreement, right? So any lease agreement is going to have certain terms that the artist has to abide by. Now, terms typically in lease agreements that are very generic will say something to the effect of the artist can stream, the beat that is incorporated in their song. And so that song can stream at least 500,000 times on Spotify, Tidal, or Apple Music before they have to start reaching out to you and saying, hey, now that I'm over 500,000 streams, we got to start paying you royalties, right? Another term or rule in the agreement might be that the artist can only sell that song 2,000 times, right? So it's only available for download 2,000 times before they have to notify you and say, hey, we're getting a lot of traction here. Just want to make sure you get your royalties. But in reality, artists don't necessarily hit you up talking about, hey man, the song went viral, so we gotta pay you royalties on this jam. Or, hey man, people are downloading the song out the wazoo, so we gotta make sure we give you these royalties. You're not gonna collect these royalties if the artist doesn't notify you, right? So here's another thing to think about. What if more than one artist is holding on to the same beat? I mean, that's an ideal situation, right? That's why we post it on SoundClick, on BeatStars.com, etc., because we want as many people to go in, access the beat, try it out, rap over it, see how they do with it. Every time they even give it an attempt and download it and purchase it through BeatStars, you're getting paid. So, you know what I mean? No skin off your back. But at the same time, let's say 10 different artists lease out the same beat at 10 different times of the year, right? That means you need to make sure that all 10 artists are following the rules of their contract so that you as a beat maker stay getting paid. Why? Because as soon as one of their leases expires and they continue using that beat, that's money on the table that you should have collected for the new year, right? That is now not being collected and the artist is running away using your beat in the sense of they don't necessarily have the copyrights for it, but since nobody's really said anything about it, they're going to keep having their fans and their audience push play on that track, which is good for them because they keep earning royalties off of that, right? At the same time, when we go in and find that an artist is streaming the song, you know, they blow up in their circuit going past 500,000 plays and they don't notify you, that's money left on the table. Those are royalties left on the table. We got to start going after those. And the terms of the agreement state that we should be able to hit them up and go in and make sure we collect those. So that's really how the terms work. The rules of the agreement state, you know, you can only have so many plays on this song before you got to start paying me royalties back. But who enforces the rules? And we talked about that earlier, right? We said that the beat maker is the one who enforces the rules. So let's talk about enforcement. Why is it important that beat makers enforce the terms of every single agreement with every artist who purchases a beat? I think we've explained it that, you know, without enforcing the terms of these lease agreements, you're missing out essentially on renewable income, recurring income. It's almost like a subscription cost that the artist is basically purchasing when they go in and sign that lease agreement and pay you the fee to use the beat for a year. By the next year, they gotta renew it. They gotta send the funds back so they can keep using that beat. Otherwise, they have to take the track down, right? Because when the artist breaches the contract or breaks the rules, there are certain steps that the beat maker can take in order to get the artist back in compliance. Now, let's talk about some good business practices. I'm sure a lot of you guys have your own method, rhyme and reason of following up with artists. It might include, you know, checking in with them maybe 2 months prior to the lease agreement expiring and saying, hey man, you know, your lease is about to expire. Do you want to renew it? Or should we anticipate that you're going to take the track down? You know, just kind of getting that clarification up front is really, really important, and it makes for building really friendly relationships between you and the artist. Because again, you don't want to be adversaries. You guys want to have a good relationship so that you can continue selling them beats should they continue being inspired by the work you put out, right? And it flows well with the work that they're trying to produce. Now, if the artist is being unresponsive, there are extra steps that you can take. You know, it doesn't have to be necessarily you guys go to court or anything like that. You can send that artist a cease and desist letter. You can also send a cease and desist letter to DistroKid, Spotify, any platform that you know is hosting that song and paying the artist royalties back, and it's in breach of that lease agreement. You can send those platforms the lease agreement, and a lot of times those platforms will actually really want to make sure that they're not infringing on your copyrights more so than they are paying this artist. So they're going to take the song down. They're going to make sure that they tell the artist like, hey, we saw that, you know, we have evidence or proof or whatever that you're in breach of your lease agreement, so we can't host this song on here and you can't get paid for it. Now, if the artist is still really catting on the issue, they're really insistent, maybe Spotify takes the song down, and regardless, they keep selling the mixtape in person, you know what I mean, and pushing units and just selling them off their private website, and there's no way to get that private website to shut it down because they own the website. Or, you know, they just keep selling the mixtapes out their trunk, and you can't just, you know, go chasing them out their trunk. So what do you do in that scenario? Now, let me be very clear. This is not legal advice. This is not me telling you this is how you can go challenge this in court, this, that, the third. But what I will share with you are some of the very open and available and accessible resources that are there and available to citizens in these United States to make sure that other citizens don't go breaching contracts that we formally make with one another, right? So when your claim or your situation is worth like a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, a lot of times, depending on your state, you can show up as a, you know, individual, a sole proprietor, an LLC, or any other entity and file a claim and have the court decide what it is that you're owed. So this is especially important if you manage to sell the beat exclusively. Let's say, remember, we had 10 artists, 10 different times of the year. Download the lease agreement, download the beat, sign the lease agreement, use the beat. Okay, cool. So then the 11th person comes through. The 11th artist is like, yo, I'm trying to buy this beat exclusively, right? Well, we got to notify all 10 other artists that the beat is no longer accessible for them to, you know, have it renewed at the end of their term lease agreement. So it's effectively void from there forward in terms of them being able to repurchase this beat and use it past their lease agreement termination, right? But if these other artists don't, you know, go ahead and listen to that notice that you put them onto, they essentially are making it impossible for you to exclusively sell the beat to that 11th person, because that 11th artist is not going to have the full enjoyment to go ahead and have that beat support their project, to which they can, you know, properly circulate amongst their audience and amongst their friends and fans. Now, if you want to see yourself get traction on the radio or get any type of headway with bigger artists, this is especially important because artists who are especially bigger and you know, have a lot more clout don't like being caught up in legal entanglements because, you know, they don't own the full copyrights of the beat after they just paid you exclusively because they got 10 other artists who are in smaller circuits who are running around with the same beat, who are not giving up that beat, right? So going to small claims court does tend to be a way to help the situation where you can get the judge to ascertain, you know, whether there are damages from the time that the artists were, you know, using that beat and the lease agreement had expired. Are there any royalties that you should have collected from the time that the beat or the lease agreement had expired? That sort of thing. They'll figure it out. But, you know, the reality is that this is hard. This is really hard to chase after every single artist, you know, make sure that they're all in compliance with their lease agreements. It's a lot of legwork. And we've come to find out that a lot of beat makers don't necessarily have the teams or the bandwidth to sell the beats, enforce every contract, and stay doing what they love doing in the first place, which is making beats. Now, we want to help. As a label, as a music label, we want to make sure that we support beat makers, artists, and everyone involved in this process in a new and revolutionary type way, in a very innovative way. We're trying to switch things up, right? So why don't we do this? Why don't the beat makers lease the beats to us? We will go ahead and therefore sublease the beats to the artists. Therefore, as beat makers, you only have one contact to keep in touch with, and that's All In-House Entertainment. And as All In-House Entertainment, when we sublease the beats, we make sure that every artist who signs a lease agreement between all of us is under the understanding that those terms and agreements are going to be fully enforced by All In-House Entertainment. We will do the legwork to follow up with artists. We'll let them know when it's time to renew the lease. we'll let them know when the lease has been sold exclusively and they are not able to renew the lease, and let them know that they've got to take it down. If the artist doesn't want to renew the lease, we'll also make sure that they go ahead and remove it. All in-house entertainment can make sure that as beat makers, you guys get paid regularly, right? Recurring income that comes in every year. Why? Because we already know that the artist loves the beat. They made a whole track on it. They made a whole project out of it. So it's in their best interest to go ahead and renew that lease. It's in our best interest to make sure that you guys get paid. And it's in everybody's interest to make sure that this industry becomes more accountable and people are not infringing on other folks' copyright interests. Because at the end of the day, all of us want our copyright interests protected. And this is a great way to make sure that no money is being left on the table and people aren't just abusing lease agreements. Because why? There's not a whole lot of enforcement, right? So if the program sounds dope, please let us know. All In-House Entertainment is inviting beat makers to come in, submit their beats. You will be leasing them out to us. We will be subleasing them out to the artists. And therefore, you can stay focused on what it is you love to do, which is making beats. Please comment below with any questions you may have. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know. This is Music Wall Street with Kazi Muhire, so more business education to come. From beat makers to artists, there is a more innovative way that labels can support you all. All In-House Entertainment's mission is to remain grassroots, innovative, and passionate about seeing the next generation of entertainers develop their music as well as business acumen in the music industry. Don't forget about us, allinhouseent.com. Check out our Instagram, allinhouseent. Check out our Twitter, allinhouseent. And from there on, have a great day. Peace, y'all.